Hello, welcome, make yourself at home for this review of Solo, a 1980 thriller by Jack Higgins. Nothing at all to do with Star Wars. This book, though, was bizarrely re-released in the same year under a different title, The Cretan Lover, but I have not read that version, so I cannot comment on what differences there are, if any, between the two. However, Solo was Higgins' 40th novel, and it follows the exploits of John Mikali, a killer for hire who draws the attention of Asa Morgan, one of the British Army's best soldiers. As usual, there's a timestamp on screen for you to slide the timer to if you'd rather skip the more detailed plot description. The book begins with an unnamed Cretan slipping into the house of a VIP and killing the owner, leaving both maid and wife unharmed. His desire to not cause any collateral damage during his hit leaves the police close on his heels, and in the process of his escaping, he hits a teenage girl with his car and kills her. With the police pursuit now engaged elsewhere, the Cretan completes his escape and enters the Royal Albert Hall, where he is revealed as John Mikali, pianist extraordinaire, the most famous classical musician in the world. This is the cover that he uses to travel the world, killing for a combination of money and excitement. The novel then details Mikali's troubled life. Though he loses his parents in the Second World War, it is the death of his beloved guardian a few years later that most distresses Mikali. Seemingly irreconcilable, he's found by his uncle playing La Pasteur on a piano over and over again. This song will be his sole expression of emotion in times of death in his future. Mikali, though, will return to Greece with his uncle, nurturing his talent on the piano. Until then, his beloved grandmother dies, and after he murders the man responsible, Mikali joins the French Foreign Legion. With them, he'll travel to Algiers and learn the arts of guerrilla warfare, showing no compunction about whether his victims are men, women, or children. He gains a reputation as an excellent but cold-blooded fighter. Meanwhile, another excellent but cold-blooded fighter is getting the news of his daughter's death. Asa Morgan is not the sort of man that you want to get on the wrong side of, and Mikali has done just that. So Asa returns from assignment in Northern Ireland, and the British Intelligence Service is keen enough to wind him up a little bit and set him on the trail of the Cretan hitman. Morgan unravels a case in a few days that has baffled the world's intelligence services for years. He tracks down Mikali, and their initial contact goes the way of the Cretan, leaving Morgan to lick his wounds, regroup, and come back for a second go. Mikali arrives on English soil to perform at the last night of the proms, and Asa Morgan is hot on his heels and thirsting for revenge. As for the previous Higgins thriller that I read, this is very much a tale with two protagonists. Mikali is a borderline psychopath, emotionally scarred, or at least repressed. An early life of multiple tragedies and a traumatic wartime event have left him with zero compassion, but he is more of a high-functioning psychopath, hiding his career as a killer for hire and sport in plain sight, caring little for the people outside of those who serve his needs. One of those is Catherine Riley. His KGB contact warns him away from getting involved, but he ignores them, super confident in his own charm and abilities. Of course, those abilities are over-egged. He's apparently the finest pianist and the finest lover in the world. There were women in plenty, and not one of them could succeed in arousing the slightest personal desire in him. There was no question of any latent homosexuality, but his relations with women were genuinely a matter of complete indifference to him. And if you think that there's a touch of the lady doth protest too much, Higgins actually goes on. The effect he had on them was something else again, and his reputation as a lover reached almost legendary proportions. It's maybe just a touch over the top, but of course a man versus man thriller does require those men to be something extraordinary. Asa Morgan is the SAS trained super soldier who will go against Mikali, and at least Higgins does offer a strong background, a reason why this struggle could go either way. He even sets the tone quite well with a simple exchange between the two British agents. "I wonder what he'll do, sir, when he hears about his daughter. God knows, George, but I can imagine." It's a shame that the last part of the scene, the wind rattled the window and outside rain drifted across the rooftops from the Thames, seems a little bit more like writing for writing's sake, rather than any truly effective pathetic fallacy. Morgan is slightly dour and not terribly interesting. He's overshadowed by Mikali. It's understandable why Dr. Riley would fall for Mikali, but hard to see a reason why Morgan would form a convincing part of a love triangle. Mikali's charm hides his true nature just too well. His fame makes his allure obvious, and with his being a world-class lover as well, where does the scarred Morgan compete? But if the love triangle feels a touch undercooked, perhaps the coincidence of both men meeting the same woman, even in Mikali's extended circle of fans, it's even less convincing. But the most ridiculous part of the triangle is Morgan taking Riley on a date to a nightclub run by a criminal gang he's investigating and planning to antagonize that evening. It seems ridiculously dangerous to them both to drag her along, but especially to the unsuspecting Riley. Why on earth would he do that? What's worse is that after ruffling and roughing up some criminals, he takes Riley home and they are followed by two of those criminals. 2 pages later, and Morgan has lost his MI5 towel, and the 2 agents in charge tell us that this is Morgan's business. He can smell a tail the moment he steps out of the door. He has an instinct for it. It's the only way he kept alive all those years. What you're really saying is there's no way he can be followed if he doesn't want to be. The obvious thing to infer from this is that Morgan knew that the criminals were tailing him and that it was all part of his plan. That is, in the space of 2 mere pages, what this amounts to. So how in such a short space of the novel can it not be the case? Morgan is followed. You tell me that that simply can't happen, but it just did. This is really simple to take somewhere, but it's strange because it simply isn't true. Perhaps the underground amateurs have skills and experiences the professionals don't. Certainly if Morgan is trained by the same people as the professionals, he would know their game better. It's not an idea I simply dismiss, but this is over-egging the situation if you don't take it anywhere in the text. Is it a clever commentary on the amateur versus professional idea, or is it just a variation on the plot armor thing? Again, the question has to be asked because the unfollowable line is thrown out again later in the story. And it's rather representative of the problem with Solo. At 240 pages, it just feels too short, too rushed, and too reliant on coincidences. Morgan's investigation is fairly obviously over as soon as he takes a look at the list of the hitman's kills. It's obvious who gains from them, so it's obvious where the investigation should begin. Despite the book's protestation to the contrary, there's just one too many Russian defectors on his hit list. It does allow for a comparison between the 2 men. Morgan is ridiculously cavalier in endangering Dr. Riley, and Mikali performing a hit in his own hotel is also an astonishing act of hubris. But is that comparison deliberate, or are things just not given the time to properly develop? The question has to be asked because much of what Morgan does seems to be a lot of running around and hopeful punting rather than genuine investigating. Perhaps again the budding amateur trumps over the international community of experts. What does make Solo work, though, is that Mikali is a convincing villain. Morgan is by no metric a great protagonist, but he has clear skills, a reason why he has them, a motivation, and after an initial knockback, has to come back with a different approach. Mikali, so confident in his abilities, approaches the finale with the face of a tragic hero. His KGB handler makes a deal with the British to save his own skins, and they're the real villains of the piece, the slimy game players who look at their pawns and where they've finished on the board in a way that seems very satisfactory as an offbeat finale. It feels quite British in that sort of last days of empire way. In terms of prose, Higgins is not much above functional, as shown with the lifeless mood setting earlier. There's nothing really that moves the needle either way. What you see on screen at the moment is bordering on unforgivable. On the other side of the bay, a track climbed steeply through the pine trees. She followed it without the slightest idea of where she was going, aware of only one thing: Mikali had lied to her. The track was steep and rocky, difficult in the light sandals she wore, fit only for mules, but she kept climbing blindly, unaware of where she was going. It's strange to see that an author that contradicted himself within a couple of pages earlier is here repeating themselves almost immediately. Higgins in Solo also repeats the fragmentation of scenes that he used in Exocet, but this is a far more effective demonstration of the technique, with Riley starting to put 2 and 2 together, MI5 lamenting the loss of yet another tale, and Morgan and Mikali coming together for the first time. The tension and the pace moves up seamlessly, and with Mikali killing time waiting for Morgan's arrival by playing the pastor on the piano, it gives it a really nice, ominous tone as well. If you hadn't realised it already, then at that point it should be clear that Mikali and Morgan make for a better combination than the similarly shaped leads of Exocet, because it is man against man and the stakes are that limited. The KGB are on the fringes, Mikali's motivation is his own, their money is simply convenient to take. Morgan's motivation is also personal and convincing. Though the bigger game, as with Exocet, is being played, these men are the pawns playing their own game inside of it, and it's personal, it's real, and it works. In conclusion, Solo is a decent thriller, significantly better than Exocet, which would come out just 2 years later with a broadly comparable plot. It is in no way outstanding, and the story relies too much on coincidence, and at times includes some surprising irrelevancies in a pretty slim novel. It might be one of those rare books that another 100 pages or so might have really helped flesh out, but it's debatable if Higgins' prose would have stood up to it based on the contradictions and repetitions I've discussed. However, in this text, those weaknesses are a smaller issue, and the pace holds up, and the two alpha males, comparable in so many ways, going man against man, is an enjoyable throwback. Equal parts entertaining and forgettable, this is a quick, simple read and quite enjoyable. Recommended within that context, even though the Cretan Lover is a truly terrible nickname for a hitman. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, click like, subscribe, comment, all of those things. They help this channel grow and make it all worthwhile. I appreciate everyone. Bye.